Hello again, everybody. Ben Garrett here of Rebel Grove on 3. Sign up today for just $1. A Mudcat Media production with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports, where we pick games week in and week out for the college football slate. And week 3 has some great matchups, especially if you're going to be laying some money down. And no man is better to guide you through that process than my man Ben Mintz. Mintzy, what's going on, man?
Doing good. Just excited because this is actually, of the 3 weeks, this is my favorite college football gambling board. Slight went like 4-2 week 1, 4-3 week 2, so we're up a little bit, which is solid. But man, this week there's a few that are really standing out, and then I also just got to add, what an interesting Saturday of college football. I mean, the 11 a.m. Clemson at Georgia Tech is fascinating. What's Georgia Tennessee at 2:30 going to be like? And then at night, you've got Arkansas at Ole Miss, Florida hosting LSU, A&M at Notre Dame, and I'm also interested in the Duke Tulane because my ties down there all at the same time. So I mean, I can't wait for Saturday. And Ben, also to note, I got made an offer I can't refuse, and I'm making my first trip to South Bend, and I'm going to A&M Notre Dame Saturday night. I'm going to be watching the Ole Miss-Arkansas game on my phone during it, but I just feel like if I'm ever going to go, never been to a game at Notre Dame. It's mid-September. The weather's nice. It's a night game. I feel like I should do it. So it's an hour and a half from here, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah, you absolutely have to do it. I mean, for guys our age, guys and gals our age, I mean, we're still like the last vestiges of like that Rudy fandom, of his dad walking and saying, this is the most beautiful sight these eyes have ever seen. So, like, I would be mad at you if you didn't go, Mincy. You're living the dream for not just yourself, but for others like me who can't wait to potentially get a game in South Bend. So I'm excited for you about that one. So let's just start there. Texas A&M, Notre Dame, that's on Saturday. Minus 7.5, 48.5 over under. What's your take on this game that you will be attending?
Okay, so a couple takes on this one. First of all, I don't trust Notre Dame laying points because they just play close games. They gravitate, like the Freeman, he knows how to win close games, but it doesn't seem like they really blow people out. They won week 1, 27-13 there last year. But the only thing that concerns me is A&M's run D didn't look very good against UTSA 2 weeks ago, and that's not good against Jeremiah Love and Notre Dame. So that's the one thing giving me a little trepidation on the A&M side. Marcel Reed in year 2, we know he can run. Think he looked better throwing the ball the first couple of weeks, but also they played UTSA and Utah State. Really like the Concepcion kid they got, the NC State transfer receiver. He got like $1 million in the portal. He's really good. So I lean A&M +7 here. I just think it's gonna be a close game. I don't know if they win, but I lean taking the points, especially at 7.5. But I'm not gonna go too huge because I'm a little worried about A&M's run D.
Well, the SEC has got a great slate this week. You mentioned Ole Miss-Arkansas. We'll get to that in a second, especially the questions around Austin Simmons. But Tennessee at Georgia, minus 3.5, 49.5 is the over-under. There's no, I think, good teams in college football right now. Parity reigns. We're in a whole new era. But this game for Tennessee seems like a tough draw. And yet, I think Tennessee, of all the teams through the first couple of weeks, has been a pleasant surprise in terms of their contention potential and kind of how they put things together. What do you make of Tennessee, Georgia?
Man, I lean Tennessee +3.5 at home. And one of the things about that and analyzing Tennessee this offseason that I've immediately had to throw away is people were down on them because Nico left and they replaced him with Joey Aguilar, the App State transfer. Well, Nico leaving's addition by subtraction. He's terrible. I mean, I bet against him the first 2 weeks. It's been the easiest money I've made is going against UCLA. And then you looked at Tennessee with Joey Aguilar scoring 45 against Syracuse in the first game. They upgraded at quarterback way bigger than we realized because the way that Nico thing went down, it looked kind of bad on them, but it was actually a huge blessing. The one question on Tennessee is their 2 starting cornerbacks are out, but man, I don't know that I believe in Gunnar Stockton yet. And I also think Mike Bobo is a bad OC. So Georgia's going to try to be physical, run it down their throat. But I lean Tennessee +3.5. I think it's going to be a close game. And also Knoxville and Tennessee, I mean, one of the better home field advantages in college football. They're going to be ready for this one. So I think I'm going with Tennessee +3.5.
Florida, LSU, the obvious conversation this week has been about Billy Napier after Florida loses in an upset to South Florida. South Florida's off to a good start, and they've got an intriguing matchup this week as well. But for you, what do you make of the Florida discussion, the Billy Napier discussion, let alone for LSU? It's minus 7.5, 48.5 over under. What's kind of your thoughts on everything going on with Florida and just how this matchup could play out?
Yeah, so the Florida side of it, their defense still looks good. I was worried about Lagway going into the year because he had a hamstring and shoulder surgeries going in, and their offense looked horrible last week. That was obviously a terrible loss. You can't lose to a regional school in your state on your home field. So obviously concerned about them. And this is a huge, I mean, Napier also coached at UL Lafayette, and he got passed over for the LSU job when they hired Brian Kelly. So this game's personal for him, too. But on the other side of it, LSU's offense didn't look good either. Last week, Louisiana Tech, I mean, who's got a good G5 defense, but like to hold LSU to 23 points, and LSU couldn't run the ball on them. So I think you got a game. You see this over-unders down to 47.5. I mean, these LSU Florida games, this is a weird series. These games are always real kind of off the rails, hard to read. So I don't know that I'm running to the window to take LSU minus 7.5. I think this thing's going to be a fight, as all these games are. I think LSU is going to pull it out, but I don't know that I'm not taking the LSU laying the points. I think I'm just going to sit back and watch it.
Does Billy Napier survive this year?
The thing is that he's got, it all depends on Lagway, because the thing the leverage Napier still has at Florida is because Lagway's loyal to him, and he was a 5-star quarterback and all that. But if Lagway keeps struggling, he probably doesn't. I think it's all on how Lagway plays as a sophomore. But man, I mean, their schedule is murder. They've got at LSU, at Miami. They go to Ole Miss. They got to play I believe they play Tennessee. The Tennessee game's still coming up. I mean, the whole rest of their schedule, they play Florida State. I mean, for them to play Miami and Florida State plus an SEC schedule is kind of, and South Florida, it's really tough. So, I mean, it's going to be tough. He's got to get them to a bowl to survive. But I expect Florida to fight here, though. I don't think they're going to just come in and roll over in Death Valley.
Well, I write for Rebel Grove on 3. Sign up today for just $1. So the obvious question with that is, Florida comes open, are we going to get another Lane Kiffin coaching rumor cycle?
I mean, always will, but with Scott Strickland, the AD at Florida, I don't know that him and Lane were always the closest stuff I've heard. And so I think that might be part of why he wouldn't go to Florida. Tell you, the guy you got to watch for Florida is the guy who beat him last week, Alex Golish at South Florida. You know, he's former Tennessee offensive coordinator. The year Hendon Hooker had a shot at the Heisman. Look what he's doing at South Florida the first 2 weeks, rolling Boise. You know, beating Florida. Now they're at Miami, which is fascinating this week. But I think Golish is a guy you got to look at for Florida.
South Carolina Vanderbilt plus 5.5, 48.5 for the over-under. I picked on Game Runs Deep, which you can find on Mudcat's family of podcasts. I'm picking Vanderbilt to get South Carolina. I think Vanderbilt's got some real juice, Mintz.
They do, and I think a big part of Vandy, we saw this last year when they played really well early in the year, you got to ride them while Pavia is healthy, because they run him so much. Into the year, he was really, really, really beat up. And this is kind of a theory I've got going with these mobile quarterbacks now. Early on in the year, they're so much more effective because by game 9 or 10 of the SEC schedule, when he's running a lot, they're just so beat up. And he can't run as much. South Carolina murdered Vandy at Vandy last year, like 38-7 too. I do think Vandy fights. I lean Vandy in the points. It's always dangerous to look at the common opponent thing, but having said that, I mean, South Carolina struggled with Virginia Tech. You know, they pulled away late because they got that punt return and that bomb to Nick Harbor. Vandy just murdered V-Tech last week on their home field, 45-20. I don't know that that's the way to analyze games. Sometimes that can be flawed logic, but, I mean, that also is a real thing. So, I think it's a close game. Give me Vandy in the 5.5.
All right, here we go. We've delayed it long enough. Ole Miss-Arkansas, so many storylines about this game. The home game has won, I think it's 5 out of the last 6, and Ole Miss hosts Arkansas, plus 7, 60.5 over-under. My prediction was for Ole Miss to win a one-score game. I think it's going to be really competitive. Taylon Green seems like he's playing his best football, and Austin Simmons is questionable, at least, or could be limited. He suffered an ankle injury against Kentucky at Kentucky. Finished that game, went back in and finished the game. And they ran the ball, didn't pass the ball but one time in the fourth quarter. Been in a boot this week. Trinidad Chambliss could really get some more run than he's had so far. The transfer from Ferris State, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last year, threw for over 3,000 yards. I mean, had a good fall camp. What do you make of this game and all the questions surrounding it, and what do you think of the Austin Simmons stuff?
Okay, starting with the Austin Simmons thing, I think he's going to go. I'm curious what his confidence will be like with the ankle thing, because he's not going to be that mobile, and so it's going to affect his head a little bit. But I think on the Ole Miss end of it, man, they found something with Lacey. I mean, this dude is a bell cow savage running back, and he had 26 for 135 last week. He had 108 against Georgia State. I'm sorry. And I think you're going to see Ole Miss just run the crap out of the ball with him, because that's the way to protect Simmons. I think Ole Miss will still be able to move the ball because Arkansas's defense sucks. Over-under's high for a reason. But Arkansas, as Ole Miss fans, Ole Miss killed Arkansas last year, 63-31. Jordan Watkins had 5 touchdowns. Arkansas has been talking about that the whole offseason. And Taylor Green, like you mentioned, his second year under Petrino, I think he's going to be effective. The Ole Miss defense, I think the front seven looks good. Secondary played well last week, but I don't know that you can really give like a ton of credit for that, because Kentucky's quarterbacks are so bad that do you give like Ole Miss? Is that like, I mean, of course, you would hope they play well. Galzada's miserable. Kentucky really can't throw. I think Ole Miss pulls this out like you do, but anytime you play Arkansas, I'm always a little anxious because the history of the series. I do love that it's a 6 p.m. night game. I think Ole Miss will have a huge home field advantage. I think, Lane Kiffin finally getting a night game. We've seen him complaining about Twitter for a while. I've got Ole Miss pulling this out, but I'm not laying the 7.5. I think the Rebs get it done. And I'm also very curious what you mentioned on the Trinidad Chambliss stuff. He gives them some juice in the running game, and I think you're going to see him come in and some running packages. I really think the key for Ole Miss, you just got to run it down Arkansas's throat. I don't think their defense is good, and I think last year obviously so much talked about after Parrish went down, the whole Bentley thing. Having a guy like Lacey is something they didn't have last year. And in this game specifically, you just got to ride him.
Again, so many storylines with this game in particular. And since I write for Rebel Grove on 3, staying on this one because it's fascinating. A huge early season game for both teams and the stories within the stories. You have Austin Simmons, who's dealing with an injury at defensive tackle for Arkansas. Man, they are really shorthanded. They've had to move an offensive lineman from the offensive line to defensive tackle to provide some depth. Otherwise, they'd be over-relying on true freshmen. That defensive front it's going through some things. While Ole Miss on the offensive line struggled against Georgia State, started off not particularly hot against Kentucky. Delano Townsend, the transfer from UAB, comes back from injury, steps in at left guard, and you see a noticeable difference. And after Austin went down, I think they really did find something, Mintz, in terms of they can really just line up and run the football. And if you add that second rushing component, Austin Simmons did some good things on that bum ankle running the ball, especially in the fourth quarter to ice it against Kentucky. But Trinidad Chambliss, I think, if he has one thing on Austin Simmons, it's his ability with those legs. It's something that Jackson Dart certainly covered up a lot of warts for Ole Miss last year. Trinidad Chambliss could be a real weapon for Ole Miss in that way. And if he's dominating snaps this week in practice, which we've heard he is, because Austin is in his boot, then that could mean you're going to see a double dip and even more reliance on running the ball with Kejuan Lacey, who leads the SEC in rushing. And honestly, I'm not sure that's not the best strategy for Ole Miss anyway, regardless of the health of Austin Simmons, because that offensive line really started to click in, and where you can really exploit Arkansas is in the interior of its defensive line. And for Ole Miss, the interior of its offensive line has been the work in progress. If they did figure something out against Kentucky, that's where you attack Arkansas this week, even without the Austin Simmons, question marks.
No, I agree. And I also think the Ole Miss, the struggles on the O-line were more in pass protection than run blocking from what I've seen before. And as far as the pass, it seemed like, obviously early on in the game, they were getting pressure on Simmons. We saw the 2 early interceptions. But, man, I got to give Ole Miss a ton of credit for the way they bounced back, because that was a bad spot. You get down 10-0 on the road with the 20-year-old starting quarterback after he threw 2 picks. That was a spot where things could snowball, and that whole game flipped on that 4th and 1 where they threw that corner out down the sideline. But I give Ole Miss credit for the way they bounced back there. I mean, I know they won by 7, and it wasn't like maybe the most aesthetically pleasing, but they pulled the road win out in a tough spot with the young quarterback, and I think there's more to be said for that than people they're getting credit for. And I feel like I said, I feel pretty good about this week. Like you said, the running game's key. Also, interesting subplot here. Ole Miss has been pillaging Arkansas in the transfer portal. We saw it with Chris Paul last year. This year, 3 guys that play heavily for Ole Miss. And, that's a little bit of an interesting dynamic. I think you're going to get a huge L for effort from Arkansas here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Luke Haas, the tight end, and Jalen Braxton, the cornerback, or cornerback safety, I should say, he's a move piece for the Ole Miss defense, according to Pete Golding, Ole Miss's third-year defensive coordinator. They haven't debuted yet. Luke could debut this week. So could Jalen. Lane Kiffin left that door open on Monday. I think Jalen's probably still at least a week off, if not longer. And I would kind of expect the same for Luke, but both of them could play and what boost they would be. But Patrick Kudus, you're right. He's been a starting offensive lineman for Ole Miss through the first 2 weeks. First week was not good, knocking the rust off. He hadn't really played either in practice or in game-like situations or game situations themselves for over a full calendar year, and it showed, but I think he got better against Kentucky, especially when Delano Townsend came in and kind of solidified some things for them at that left guard spot. So you're right. That's another story within the game that we'll be following, whether or not those two players, Luke Haas, who could be a big piece with Daquan Wright and Caleb Odom in the Ole Miss tight ends room, and Jalen Braxton for a secondary who is figuring some things out, but I think have had a good start considering how much they are replacing. But Jalen Braxton would be such a big piece for them. All right, Miami, South Florida, plus 17.5, 56.5 over under. USF coming off the win over Florida, the upset over Florida. Do they get Miami this weekend?
I don't know if they get them, but I like the 17.5. This is a tough spot for USF because it's the third tough game in a row. Granted, they murdered Boise, but that was a really physical game at Florida. Now you're at Miami. I know everybody's probably going to be on them this week too because of the Florida win. I still think they fight. I like Brown, the dual threat quarterback, but their defense deserves a lot of credit. Their defense played great in both games, and I think they can keep them in it. So I lean South Florida plus 17.5. I don't know that they win the game, but I think they fight and they don't get embarrassed.
Okay, Alabama, Wisconsin, plus 20.5, 40.5 over under. What's your take there?
Yeah, I think it's like 46. I lean the under. Wisconsin just can't score, man. I mean, we all saw the Phil Longo experience the last couple of years. I'll never understand for the rest of my life how Luke Fickell is just like, you know what I want to do? I want to run the air raid at Wisconsin. That's just unbelievably dumb. And now they're off it and they're trying to get back to their power running game roots. But, I know Bama's defense may not be what it was, but it's still hard to run it down their throats. I do think Wisconsin has a good defense that'll keep them in it, but I lean the under in this game. I think Bama wins by like 14-21. So I don't have an opinion on the spread, but I think it's going to be lower scoring.
Clemson, Georgia Tech, plus 3.5, over 50. I'm with you. I think Georgia Tech has got a real shot to knock them off this weekend. Hayes King is a gamer, man, just competes his tail off. And there's nothing that Clemson has done so far that's been particularly inspiring to me. So I think this is a prime Georgia Tech pull it off kind of spot for them.
Yeah, and also Georgia Tech the last couple of years has been the best underdog at pulling upsets in college football. They've pulled a ton of upsets as a big underdog with Hayes King. And Georgia Tech Clemson's an old ACC rivalry. There's a lot they've historically through the years, even when Georgia Tech sucks, they've played hard against Clemson. This game's in Atlanta. I like Georgia Tech in the points. There's also a chance they lose by 3 or lose close. But, I like both Georgia Tech and Tennessee catching 3.5. I think Georgia Tech's got a real shot. Clemson's offense hadn't come untracked yet. Obviously they were losing 16-3 at home against Troy last week. They did bounce back second half. Offense looked terrible. LSU shut them out in the second half. I think this thing's going to be a dogfight, so give me the home underdog.
Thursday, September 11th, NC State, Wake Forest, plus 7, a little over 50 for the over-under. What's the takeaway for NC State, Wake Forest? Since that's
anytime two crappy ACC teams playing, I just ignore it. I mean, there's so many matchups in this league that are just whatever. I mean, I know Wake's terrible, but I got nothing. I do have a strong opinion on a Friday night game, though.
I hope it'll be the Colorado-Houston game.
It is. I think Houston's going to beat the dog crap out of Colorado.
Uh-oh.
Houston, this is year 2 under Willie Fritz. They have NIL money. They had a great defense last year, but they couldn't throw forward passes. They got Connor Wegman from A&M transferred. It didn't work out at A&M, but he was a 5-star recruit. They beat Rice 34-9 last week, and Rice actually, nobody realizes this. They're not horrible. They won at ULL and beat Walker Howard week 1 and held them to 88 yards passing. I think Houston wins by like 3 touchdowns. I think Colorado is not. They're headed the wrong direction. And I think Houston is my sleeper team in the Big 12 this year, and I think this is a big breakout spot for them. So I really like Houston Friday. It's one of my favorite plays of the week.
Yeah, Colorado is figuring some stuff out. Deion's coming out after the report emerges that Ryan Staub, their third-string quarterback, is positioned to start for Colorado against Houston over 2 decorated players in Caden Salter. And, I mean, look, the bottom line is this. Colorado is not off to the starts you want in year, 3 under Deion, and you're already having a quarterback, question mark, and he's answering questions about the quarterback. And what do you make of kind of all that and kind of how Deion's handling things? And it also leads to what you're saying. I mean, I think Houston is well positioned here to really take it to Colorado.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's Houston's emerging. I don't think Colorado's going to score a lot of points, and I'm actually surprised Deion's still there. Obviously he had health problems. And, I felt like he was tied into his 2 sons, playing at Colorado. I thought this might be a spot he'd be 2 and gone. They're still recruiting pretty well, but they're rebuilding this year. As you mentioned, they hadn't figured out their quarterback thing. I mean, I think this one could be kind of ugly, to be honest.
Ryan Staub starting just – even if you're trying to live or try to ride the wave of a first-year starting quarterback, Ole Miss has done that. To make that move that quickly after he comes in garbage times and does pretty well seems pretty desperate. It just tells me that Colorado just doesn't know what it wants to do yet or what it is. And you're right. It's interesting to see Deion at Colorado by himself, right? And how this season works out is going to tell us a lot about his future there and if he moves on, whatever it might be. But the health issue is a big deal too. So your number 1 pick of the week is what? Number 1.
Well, okay, I have 2. Houston's one of them, and the second one we're going to talk about right now. It's this Duke going to Tulane game in New Orleans Saturday night on ESPN2. Look, Duke starting quarterback Mintz obviously started for Tulane last year. This game's been triple starred all offseason by John Summerall and Tulane when their ex-starting quarterback comes in Nola. This line, I don't know what's going on with this point spread. I saw Tulane by 3 earlier this week. Now it's Duke by 1.5. That is a weird movement. Mm-hmm. But what I saw out of Duke last week against Illinois, they got blown out in the second half at home. We saw what Ole Miss did to Duke in the bowl game. I know Duke won 9 games last year, but to me, that was more an indictment of the ACC. Tulane's going to be ready for this one. This is one of their biggest games of the year. They're going to be ready for Mintz. I like Retzlaff for Tulane. I thought he had a great year at BYU, leading them to 10 games. And I think Tulane's got a really good defensive line and defensive front. And they're going to get after Mintz. And I think Tulane wins this game. So Houston and Tulane are my 2 favorites.
This has been a Mudcat Media production with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. I'm Ben Garrett of Rebel Grove on 3. And because of that, which you can sign up for $1, I'm going to end it with this. If you had to project after 2 weeks and heading into week 3 for Ole Miss football, where they end up in the postseason, what are you saying now?
I still said that, whatever they call the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, and I still feel that way. That was a huge win week 2, though, because it was more like dodging a disaster. But, if you lose that Kentucky game, everything changes, and it could all snowball the wrong way. They got to pull out this Arkansas game. But, I feel like they're trending positively if Simmons can be healthy. I said 8-4 before the year. All our fans wanted to kill me on Twitter because they said I was underrating it. But, I think things are on the right track for 8 or 9 wins right now.
Got to get to 5-1 going into Georgia at least to really keep yourself in the college football playoff discussion and in those discussions for the Citrus Bowl, whatever it's called now. I think it's like the Cheeses something or other, whatever it might be. I mean,
it's Capital One, I think.
Okay, well, Capital One, there we are. So to get that trip to Disney World or to be a college football playoff contender, this Arkansas game is a big swing game for that specifically, and Austin Simmons' health is what we'll be most paying attention to at Rebel Grove. And also, when talking about the lines and the odds and all those things at Barstool, Ben Mintz will for Ole Miss Arkansas as well. So thank you, my friend, for doing this. It's always fun. We'll talk again next week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben.